time. He doesn't, you're not going to go into the studio every day and say, hey, Mikael, I got an hour for you today. Cool, right? It doesn't work, right? Not going anywhere. It's not going to fly. Okay. So, most importantly, you've got to collect very heavy virtue, and that it's a little delicate to say, but that is mainly serving a spiritual teacher, mainly serving some kind of spiritual being who's trying to help as many people as possible. And so it's spending one's life in the service of high virtue and spending one's life in the service of holy things. Not me, not XYZ, but finding someone or something that you consider to be very holy and putting a lot of energy into it, putting a lot of time and effort and energy into it, right? So extremely important, like heavy duty stuff, right? Takes big time energy and basically devoting your life to that cause. If you want to see emptiness, you got to really devote your life to that cause. Just like if you want to dance with Mikhail Baryshnikov, you got to devote your life to that cause. It's not going to happen, right? By and large, right? So you have to find some personal connection with the holy being, someone that you feel is very spiritual or very holy, and really connect with them, really devote yourself to them, and really put a lot of time and energy into it, really offering service in that way, right? So they're studying like crazy, they're serving a holy being, and then meditating regularly. The perception of emptiness occurs in deep meditation, in a very deep state of meditation. And that means engaging in a regular, consistent, unbroken practice, an hour or two a day, to develop the capacity to meditate at a deep level where one can have that kind of perception in meditation. So there are thousands of meditative states. And there's one specific meditative state where one perceives ultimate reality, where one perceives emptiness. And so one has to be able to enter into that meditative state. There's a certain platform that one reaches to have the experience of ultimate reality. So it's one where the sense objects are shut down, you're withdrawn from the senses in deep samadhi. And if somebody were banging on a drum in the room or brought your favorite dessert in or your favorite dinner, you wouldn't smell it because you're withdrawn from your senses. Your mind is not engaging and registering your senses, right? Okay. And so if you don't meditate every day seriously, then there's really probably no hope of reaching that level of meditation. So those are the main preliminaries that one has to engage in to be able to see emptiness and experience ultimate reality. I mean, why? Think about it. The mind has to be very pure, it has to be very holy, right? Has to be deeply habituated to ultimate reality to the best of our ability as our mind is functioning. Like our minds have limitations, right? And so they're capable of a certain range of thought and understanding and all the rest. So for our mind's capacity, we have to have as much exposure to and understanding of emptiness as we can, right? So we're trying to bring our mind closer and closer to it intellectually. We're trying to collect virtue, karmically, right? We're trying to train our mind to become more still and more subtle, right? So that these various causes can come together and all ripen together into a result. Because that's really, to your question, Hector, is like what seeds have to be there, what causation has to be there, which can ripen into this result, right? And so quite a few things have to come together. It's not necessarily one seed, there's a series of things that have to come together for it to happen. So those are the main preliminaries. There's a subject called Chi Chedrak that is very important to study, and we use Buddhist logic quite extensively to dissect reality, to evaluate reality, to try to penetrate more deeply into reality, right? So the study of Chi Chedrak is a very essential element of that Buddhist logic. And so it's Chi and Chedrak, quality and characteristic, right? So Chi means quality and Chedrak means characteristic. So it's sometimes crudely translated as set and subset or general and specific, but those aren't really useful translations. Really, quality and characteristic are what's useful. So it's a very deep subject and it's very difficult when you're first exposed to it. But if I say, so this is what we're talking about. And this is extremely important to understand the nature of reality, the nature of perception, the nature of how we perceive the world and how we exist in the world and how we relate to all of existence. Right? So if I see this, right, this is a cup, one cup, right? Bless you, single cup, right? But there's also cup, broadly speaking, right? The concept cup, right? All right. So the broad concept cup subsumes lots of cups, right? There's ones with handles, ones without handles, square ones, round ones, tall ones, short ones, on and on and on. Made of this, that, and the other, right? Countless variations and permutations of the idea cup, right? So cup is what we would call G, okay? Quality, all right? So how is it that that quality exists? Where did the concept cup come from? Not a cup, not the cup, not one cup, cup. The conceptualization of the idea cup, where did it come from? Okay, and how is it that when I see this thing, I call it a cup? I call it a mug, subsumed in cup, let's say, for simplicity's sake. I say, oh, that's a coffee cup or a teacup, right? And then there's another glass. You can say, oh, that's a highball cup, or that's a whatever, right? So that's a plastic cup. That's a glass cup. On and on and on, right? So notice there a glass cup. Okay. So this is the idea of quality and characteristic. Okay. This cup, right, is characteristic of the quality cup. Okay. This thing is characteristic of the quality cup. Right. Why? How is it that my mind can look at all the things in existence and pick that one out as a cup that belongs with the quality cup? Why doesn't my mind look at this and call it a cup? How did I get the category of cup? And how did I put this in the category of cup and not put this in the category of cup? Well, this doesn't have a handle. This isn't round. Can't pour liquid into it. And pick your definitions, you see. And so the study of Chichedra, the study of quality and characteristics, as you delve more and more deeply into it, leads you to understand how the mind functions to perceive reality. How the mind looks at all of existence and comes up with all of the names and terms and categories and concepts that are our existence. Right? For example, we call everything that exists the universe. Right? Well, then we break that down further. And we say, okay, then there's galaxies and there's solar systems and there's stars and suns and moons and planets in orbit, and then on this planet there's land and water and fish and creatures of the sea and the air and humans and non-humans. And when you train yourself, you watch your mind use language and ideas to take all of existence and fragment it into endless concepts and categories. Okay? Take all of existence and withdraw all of those concepts and categories. All of existence is still there. Just didn't put any concepts and categories on it. Okay? From our side. Because I'm not calling it the universe doesn't mean it stopped being the universe. Right? So, for me, as an existing being, rational, intelligent human being, I look at reality and I say, oh, this is how I define it. This is how I describe it. This is how I name it. This is how I take all of existence and put everything in a little box so that I can understand it and relate to it. Because if I didn't have all these little endless boxes, I couldn't put a name on things. and I couldn't relate to it, and I couldn't relate the pieces to each other. So on and on and on and on, okay? So one really has to delve into this logic of Chi-Chedrak, quality and characteristic, to examine themselves and the world around them, to understand how the mind relates to everything, and how the mind conceptualizes everything, right? Vis-a-vis projection, right? Okay. Let's see. So, once one studies Chi-Chedrak enough, and deeply enough, then eventually a little light bulb goes off, and one kind of has sort of an aha, and gains deep insight into the nature of changing things and unchanging things. Sometimes changing things and unchanging things are translated as permanent and impermanent, but it's a bad translation, right? So if we talk about changing things, there are two levels of changing things. Like this cup is, it changes. Like I drop it, it breaks into a bunch of pieces, it's changed, right? That's a gross, obvious changing thing, right? No problem. But there's a subtle nature of changing which is going on all the time, and it's sort of a subtle flux in which things exist. And as one studies the subject deeply, engages in deep meditation, collects heavy virtue through serving a holy being and those in need, one begins to perceive the subtle impermanence of things. And when one begins to see the subtle impermanence of things, which is a subtle flux which is going on constantly, it's just short of perceiving emptiness. It's just shy of perceiving emptiness directly. It's a very high spiritual state. Say chuchok?
Chuchok.
Chuchok means highest thing. Chu means a thing. In this case, and chok means the highest. It's the highest thing in the world. It's the level you reach just before perceiving emptiness directly. So, we talked about the 5 Buddhist paths, right? So, we're on the path of preparation when we're trying to see emptiness, when we're trying to experience ultimate reality. We're on the second path of preparation, preparing to see emptiness, right? And the path could last months, it could last years, right? But when one is actively and diligently engaged in the path of preparation, one gains a deep intellectual understanding of emptiness. So you've been collecting all these other karmas. If one is deeply engaged in the path of preparation, one is doing the things which I talked about earlier on in the class, right? One's serving a holy being intently, one's meditating consistently and regularly, one's studying Chi-Chedrak, one gets to a point where they can perceive the subtle impermanence and fluctuation of things, and then one eventually moves towards an experience of dependent origination. One has an experience where they're actually able to observe themselves projecting reality, right? The nature of perception, again, I'm not going to recap too much, but the nature of perception is that, when I look at this cup, I can't see a cup, or I can't see cup. I can't see quality or characteristic. What I can see is white, roundness, a little bit of shape. I can only see parts here and there. I can't see the left side and the right side at the same time. I can't see the top and the bottom at the same time. My eye is flitting around. The nature of perception is such that the eye flits around and perceives shadow, light, round, straight, hollow, moving, liquid. Mind can't perceive liquid, right? Sorry, the eye can't perceive liquid, right? The eye can perceive shapes and colors, right? The eye can perceive a certain color, a certain shape, a certain visual identity, right? And then it assembles that into a cup, right? So that process of perceiving a little bit of rim, a little bit of liquid, a little bit of curve, a little bit of hollow, all those separate pieces. At that point, one observes oneself taking all that in and creating the image in one's mind, creating a cup, in one's mind. It's like watching the movie from behind the projector, almost. That's not quite right. It's seeing the movie projected before it comes out of the mind, is maybe a better way to say it. It's seeing the cup assembled in the mind and created in the mind as the identity cup, and then projected out onto the stuff that's here. Right? There's no cup here. Cup doesn't exist here. Right? There's only some hints. Right? The eye is splitting around. It's collecting lots of data points, and somewhere along the way, it's going, I have enough data. I'm calling it a cup, and this is how it works, and this is what it does. So that direct observation of oneself doing that is the experience of dependent origination. Okay. So one has that experience. One has that realization, you could say, right? You see the mind filling in all of the gaps, right? You see the mind collecting data points and then filling everything in between the data points to create a cup. And you observe it happening directly, right? And so that's a very high realization. That's a very high state of mind, which is quite profound. And it's stunning when it happens to sit there and go like, oh my God, I'm just seeing bits of information and I'm watching my mind turn it into something, right? So did you see emptiness? No, you saw dependent origination for the first time, right? You see for the first time what's really going on with every single perception in your reality. Normally we just go, there's a fact, and that's the end of it. We don't observe ourselves going, 1,000 data points, assembled, picture, name, term, fan. But observe it. It's like slowing it down and observing it, right? Okay. Okay. So for thousands of lifetimes, millions of years, we've been perceiving things incorrectly, and so for the first time in our entire existence, we observe the mind creating positive reality based on data points, right? Sensory input, right? Observe it directly. Okay. So you have that observation for a short time, and then shortly after that, once one continues one's practice, one's regular meditation practice, and goes into deep meditation and has a direct experience, goes into that special state of meditation, and then has a direct experience of ultimate reality, right? So what's going on up to that point? What's going on up to that point is one has collected all these causes, right? Heavy virtue, pure mind, virtuous state, deep intellectual understanding of emptiness, such that the mind is kind of in the ballpark, if you will. And then one combines, one triggers, all of these karmas are triggered to come, all these karmas are triggered to result in this series of experiences, right? Which are what? What are the series of experiences we just talked about?
Reaching the peak of the second path, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so on the path of preparation, right? And during the path of preparation, one gets to a point where one is perceiving subtle impermanence.
And
right?
then...
Well, first you have don't forget the study of Chi-Chedrock, right? You have the deep study of the nature of perception and the nature of reality logically, right? Which leads to the perception of subtle impermanence, the subtle flux of things which seem to be permanent, right? And then after that comes the direct experience of dependent origination, where we see the mind and we experience the mind assembling sensory input into reality, right? And then after that, we go into deep meditation and have the direct experience of ultimate reality. So that's a sequence of events, right? The progression, if you will, the progression through that. And so then you have the experience, and then, as we said half an hour or so ago, that experience can't be described because we live in a certain level of reality. We live in kunzokdamba, right? Deceptive reality, fake reality. We live in a reality where things appear to be self-existent. We live in a reality where we are projecting name, identity, and concept onto stuff and calling it self-existent, right? We live in a reality which is all about language and terms and names and positive identification of blue and red and boy and girl and subject and object, right? This other level of reality, ultimate reality, doesn't have that. It's a reality without that. And so language doesn't bridge the gap and language doesn't describe it. And so we have the direct experience of it, right? And so when we finish with the direct experience of it, the language and names and terms of this level of reality are completely irrelevant and useless in terms of trying to relate to it and understand it. And that's why, as we said last week, we went into the name, right? Name derivation of the Diamond Cutter Sutra. Right? So I'm not going to repeat that because we don't have time. Okay. So in deep meditation, the mind takes on the aspect of emptiness. Right? So it's mirroring emptiness due to the silence of the mind. It's able to mirror emptiness as the mind is in direct communion with emptiness. The mind has the aspect of emptiness in the way that the mirror has the aspect of, a red suit that's put in front of it. Right? So the mind is totally calm and it's reflecting ultimate reality. Right? So when one is having that experience, is one sitting there in deep meditation thinking, my mind is taking on the nature of emptiness? No, because those are all conceptualizations. And this is a state free of conceptualization. Right? Is one sit in deep meditation thinking, I'm now seeing emptiness? Is one going like, woohoo, I finally did it? No. Is one going like, I wonder if I can stay here for at least an hour or two? No, those are all conceptualizations. Right? It's all based on linear time, right? Mental ideation. So in this state of meditation, one is in direct communion with this other reality, which is a completely other way of being than this reality. Right? So, and then when you finish with that, when you come out of that, so one's physical form is here in this reality, in this realm, and one's mind has actually traveled to another realm. It's the first level of the form realm. And so there's actually a sensation of the mind coming down as one comes out of meditation, as the mind goes from one realm to another. But then when one re-engages one's senses, so if you remember what we said a little while ago, right? In this meditation, this very specific meditation, one's withdrawn from the senses. The mind is not engaged with the physical senses or the physical body, right? It's a mental event, right? And so the mind is having this experience of another realm, another level of reality. Is there another level of reality, self-existent, that the mind floats off to and sits on a little platform over there and has an experience? No. Right? I mean, even talking about it, it's very easy to get into self-existent view, you see? You have to be careful, right? So, so that path of preparation, right, can last however long, months, years, depending on how intensely one is pursuing it. Then the next path, the third path, the path of seeing, right, which is where one sees emptiness, lasts about a day. It's the direct experience of emptiness and what follows. Right? So there's a series of follow-on experiences associated with the direct experience of ultimate reality. So there's a series of realizations and events that occur over the next 12 hours or day or whatever it is, where there's 16 of them, and they're grouped into four, which are called the four Arya truths or Four Noble Truths. The old translation or the inaccurate translation is Four Noble Truths, right? What does Arya mean? Arya is Sanskrit for
angel.
Well, someone who's seen emptiness. Arya is someone who's perceived ultimate reality, someone who's seen emptiness. So that's a Sanskrit term. So these are four truths that someone who's seen emptiness experiences directly. There are realizations, there are follow-on realizations that flow after the direct experience of emptiness, right? So the first is, you see your own enlightenment. You have a direct experience, a valid perception of your own future enlightenment. You see the day that you'll become enlightened. You see yourself, you know you'll be a Buddha, and you know how long it will take, right? So in that period of half a day or a day after seeing emptiness, one makes more spiritual progress in that day than they have in thousands of lifetimes. And one moves the spiritual needle more in that day than in countless lives and countless rebirths. So you confirm directly your future lives as a follow-on. You know, you see when you become enlightened, and you see how many lives it will take. You know, and obviously then you have confirmation of past and future lives, and that you're seeing your future lives directly as a valid perception. You realize that you've met the Dharmakaya of a Buddha, embodied of a Buddha. And you have a valid perception of these things, in that you know you're not hallucinating. You know, very often with spiritual experiences, spiritual experiences and spiritual realizations, like after a week or a month or a year, people start to go like, did that really happen? You know? Or was that really true? Like, he put his finger up to me and I felt like electricity flew out of his finger and like into my brain, and like something else happened, and you know, it seemed very real at the time, and I was certain it happened at the time, but that was 10 years ago, and I wonder if it really happened, you know? So it's very easy to have these sorts of ambiguities around spiritual things. So one has a valid perception that this is absolutely true, and one doesn't, it doesn't fade and one doesn't lose it, right? So you're able to confirm your own spiritual realizations. And as another follow-on, you can read people's minds for the rest of the day, which isn't necessarily a great thing, because most people's minds are pretty messed up. You might think it's kind of sexy, like, ooh, I could read her mind, what she's thinking. You know, what's she thinking? And then you can read a person's mind, and they're thinking like, oh my God, I'm so unhappy. Oh, I'm so lonely. Oh, why doesn't he like me? Oh my God, I need a pair of shoes. Oh, you know, my job sucks, and most people aren't happy. And it's not really a blessing to be able to read their minds.
Molly's soliloquy in Ulysses, it's just like her mind, you know, for pages and pages and pages and pages, and it's like, really? So,
a little
like
truth there. Huh?
Yeah, if you could imagine somebody's mind.
Right. Yeah. And so, you know, it's like there's almost this fail-safe built in. It's like, until you have a high enough spiritual capacity that you can really handle it, and you have this like high bodhicitta, you can't read other people's minds. It's like you wouldn't want to. Anyway, so, and then when you come out of this this experience, this direct experience of ultimate reality, the mind starts searching and looking for something that it can grasp onto to relate the experience to in this level of reality. You know, something which is like, what was it like? You know, how can I describe it? You know, what's it analogous to? And so then the diamond we talked about last time is the closest metaphor, right? Vajra in Tibetan. So it's the one object in the universe which is close to an absolute, you know, absolute hardness, right? The hardest thing. So there are other minor realizations that follow on, like realizing the importance of Buddha images, and that the images were drawn by someone who saw the beings directly at one point and were then passed down as an accurate representation of an enlightened being. So
how does a Volkswagen have all those arms and hold on to them?
How do they hold on to all the things and all the hands?
How big is his shoulders?
Yeah, how do you fit all those into one shoulder? Well, yeah. Have to try for the directed perception and see how that turns out, right?
Okay.
See if you get a closer examination, right? But the idea is, you know, the picture came from someone who met Tara, you know, and this is so, you know, what is the physical manifestation of enlightened action or compassionate action or something like that, right? So another realization one has is about prostrations. When one meets, when one experiences ultimate reality and comes out of that, you throw yourself on the ground and make prostration, and that's the true meaning and derivation of a prostration. And that's where it comes from. It's like you've experienced the Dharmakaya, and so you, in the presence of the Dharmakaya, which is the mind of enlightenment, you throw yourself on the ground because that's appropriate. So they have a realization that every single Buddhist book is true and that this is a true path which leads to the end of suffering. So brings people to ultimate happiness. You confirm the path is absolutely true, it's accurate, it works, it gets people to paradise and enlightened paradise. And then there's a very important realization, which is a direct experience of bodhicitta, one's first experience of bodhicitta, if one's on the Mahayana path. If one has bodhisattva aspiration, one attains bodhicitta, there's this experience of light coming out of one's heart and experiencing all of the beings in existence, having a direct knowledge that you'll spend the rest of your life and all of the moments of your life helping every living being and trying to end suffering for every living being. And you'll dedicate yourself to that for the rest of your life. So you see impermanence, you realize directly your own impermanence in the terms of death and seeing your death in your future lives. And in a way, it's maybe a little bit of a depressing realization. You realize you've never had a correct perception in your entire life. For our entire existence, for infinite time, we've perceived everything to be self-existent. And so, with a direct experience of ultimate reality, we realize and see directly that every single perception we've ever had has been wrong. It's been ignorant. It's been incorrectly perceiving how things truly exist, according to ultimate reality and higher reality, right?
That's really hard to hear you say that.
I know, it's depressing, right? It is our reality, though. I mean, this is our valid reality.
Not even one little.
Not even one. You know, in the things that we do, like we say, okay, I'm going to do prayers, or I'm going to serve the sick, or help the poor, or whatever. You know, every single perception we have is polluted with self-interest and self-existent thinking. And I'm doing this to benefit myself. You know, I'm doing this so that I can get ahead. I'm doing this so that I can get what I want, right? So, and it's not a guilt trip. You know, it's not like Buddhism is trying to lay some kind of guilt trip upon us to say, oh, we're bad, there's something wrong with us. There's something wrong with us, but not in a guilty way. It's just from beginningless time, we've had wrong view, and we don't have any choice. And we have to train ourselves to perceive things purely in a spiritual sense, right? So when you have the direct perception of emptiness, and even when you come out of it, you're in the direct perception of emptiness for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, right? You come out of that deep state of meditation, ordinary view reasserts itself, right? I mean, I'm abiding in ultimate reality, non-conceptual existence. I finish, I come out of it, and then I open my eyes from my meditation. I look around and I go, oh, there's Bruce. Right back to where I was in a way, right?
Depressing, isn't it?
Not at all, Bruce. Delightful. But there's a big difference. And the difference is now I know for a fact that projection and that ideation and that way of thinking is very limited, right? It's deceptive. It's this reality, not highest reality. And so now I have a completely different frame of reference for how I live and how I think. It's like, oh, there's another level of reality which I've been to, I've experienced directly, I've seen, I understand, I know about, and I have this experience level of reality. I can now juxtapose two levels of reality, right? As ordinary people here, we've only got one level of reality. We don't have a frame of reference to compare it to. But once I'm over here and I have this other level of reality, and I have a frame of reference for comparison, and I go like, oh my God, this totally sucks over here. I don't want this, I want this. This is completely twisted, completely backwards, completely confused, completely ignorant, constant misperception, and this is not. This is what I want. So now I have to fix this to be here all the time, right? And so one then is on the fourth Buddhist path, right? Path of habituation, right? The path of habituation is where we spend however long it takes to change how we perceive things, right? By cleaning up our negative karma, being virtuous, and having pure projections of reality, right? How do you do that? It takes a long time to re-habituate ourselves, right? It's impossible to permanently stop a mental affliction without seeing emptiness directly. It can't be done. One can sort of hold it down, suppress it, reduce it for a while, fight it, counteract it. One cannot permanently end it, ever, until one has seen emptiness directly. There is no antidote to any mental affliction other than seeing emptiness directly. Right? Everything else is a temporary measure and a band-aid. All of the methods taught by Master Shantideva and everyone else, and all the texts that say, oh, try this, try this, try this. They're all temporary measures and band-aids that will help for a while, right? Help to some degree, but they will not permanently eliminate any mental afflictions. Seeing emptiness is the only thing which will ever permanently eliminate any mental affliction. Depression, loneliness, jealousy, anger, you name it, right? Okay. So, when one comes out of the direct experience of ultimate reality and sees everything at this level of reality, deceptive reality, right? I was seeing emptiness, say, and I came out and opened my eyes, and there's Bruce, and there's the room, and this is all conventional reality. This is all false reality, deceptive reality, right? That's what's meant by the term illusion in Buddhism. We have this term of things are like an illusion. It's the only thing that the term illusion really means in Buddhism. Often you'll hear people say, oh, Buddhism says life is an illusion. It's like a dream, it's like a cloud, like a bubble, etc., etc., etc. This is what the term illusion means in Buddhism. It means that things are appearing one way to us normally, and they're not that way, really, ultimately. And when you perceive ultimate reality, and you have that as a benchmark and a frame of reference, you can look at this reality and say, I see it that way, and I know it's not ultimately accurate and true. And therefore, it's like an illusion. Right? Bruce is a valid perception. Bruce is my valid reality. And I know that ultimately, something else is going on there. Ultimately, there's ultimate reality there that I can be perceiving, and not just Bruce. Okay, so I think let's take a break and keep looking at the clock. Let's take a break and then we'll continue on. Okay.